Hello! I am Jack Quinn, and I'm a 5th grade teacher in the great state of Texas. I first heard about Kahoot during a technology training that I was leading at the beginning of last year. Kahoot sounded awesome, and when I heard about it, I'm like, yes, I definitely want to test it, but I try and reserve any final decision until it's student tested. Our first Kahoot was really simple. I selected some key points from our science unit and the common misunderstandings associated with them. I wrote the questions, I made it an open note review, and I gave students directions to include evidence from their notebook or from their book for any answer they gave. Throughout the game, I was delighted to hear the urgent flapping of papers as students frantically turned pages looking through their notes, debating diagrams and the decisions. They loved the opportunity to play with what they are learning. I love the data and the ability to pause the game instantly and address any common misunderstandings. Teachers have always kind of been handled all these different hats. I think one of the newest ones that we see is data analytics, like look at your students' data and make decisions based on it. So when it came time to decide, do I really want to incorporate Kahoot into like all of my routines, into my weekly routines, I had to look at the data. What I found was that on the 9 standards that I assessed before I used Kahoot, my students had an average score of 77.24, which is not quite where I'd like to be. On the following 15 standards, my students had an average score of 86.11, an increase of 8.87 percentage points, which was awesome. Next, I looked at the ever-looming state release test. I took the release test from 2014 for my state of Texas, and I had given it to my 15-16 class. They averaged 69.82. When I gave the same assessment in the 2016-2017 school year, those students averaged 81.22, a gain of 11.4 points. Next, I took the differences between those two data points and projected out my performance to the end of the year on the state assessment. Assuming my students maintain that growth rate on the final assessment, and we're still waiting to hear back from the state, they will have performed 1.75 times the district norm in growth. My students this year have already identified Kahoot as one of their favorite things. It can be challenging as well as time-consuming to convince students to deposit that kind of effort without clearly communicating to them their return on that investment. Kahoot does this in a currency that students understand: points. So my best advice is don't be afraid to pause the game. As soon as you see a misconception, you can reteach it. This is actually one of the biggest time savers. And finally, be prepared for a productively loud classroom. But that's part of the fun.